Imagine this. Someone says something that cuts deep, a careless word, a sharp tone, a misunderstanding that wasn't your fault. You feel that fire rise in your chest. Your mind starts building arguments, ready to defend, ready to prove them wrong. But in that exact moment, something inside you begins to drain. Your peace, your energy, your clarity, they slip away. Not because of what happened, but because of how you reacted. Most of our energy and peace aren't stolen by the world. They're lost in the storms we create inside ourselves. We get caught in debates that lead nowhere, trapped in the need to win, desperate to be understood. And every time we react out of anger or pride, we hand over a piece of our inner power to someone else. Buddhism teaches a simple yet profound truth. Asterisk. Asterisk. Non-reaction is a form of intelligence. Asterisk. Asterisk. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've chosen to protect your peace more than your ego. Sometimes, silence is not surrender, it's mastery. The ability to remain calm in chaos is not indifference, it's strength. Because when you stop reacting, you stop giving control of your emotions to others. You begin to see things as they are, not as your anger paints them to be. So next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, pause, take a breath, let them keep their chaos, and you keep your calm. That moment of restraint, that single choice not to react, might just be the most powerful thing you ever do for yourself. And if this message touches your heart, if it reminds you of something you've felt but never had words for, take a moment to like, share, or follow this channel. Because each time you do, you help spread a little more peace in a world that deeply needs it. And that, too, is an act of mindfulness. Stay until the end, because what comes next will show you times to master the art of non-reaction and reclaim your inner energy. 1. The trap of reaction. There was a man named Daniel. He was kind, hard-working, always trying to do the right thing. But Daniel had one weakness: he couldn't stand being disrespected. Whenever someone said something harsh or unfair, his heart would start to race. He'd defend himself, raise his voice, argue, explain anything to prove he was right. And every time he did, he felt drained afterward. It didn't matter if he won the argument inside, he always lost something. Peace, energy, clarity. One day at work, his colleague made a cruel joke in front of everyone. Daniel's first instinct was to fight back, to show he wouldn't be walked over. But then, something unexpected happened. He remembered a line he once read from the Buddha. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. He took a breath. For the first time, he didn't react. He just stood there, calm. The room fell silent. And the colleague, expecting a fight, didn't know what to do next. That silence, it wasn't weakness. It was power. Because in that moment, Daniel realized something. Every time he reacted out of anger, he was handing over his energy to someone else. He was letting them control his state of mind. Most of us were raised to believe that reacting is strength, that defending yourself, fighting back, means you're standing up for your worth. But here's the paradox. The person who provokes you doesn't gain strength from your silence, they gain it from your reaction. Because when you react, they control your emotions. They own your peace. True strength lies in choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Buddhism teaches that wisdom begins when reactivity ends. When you can observe your emotions without letting them rule you, you step into a different kind of power. The power of awareness. You start to see that not every battle is worth fighting. Sometimes, walking away isn't losing. It's choosing freedom over chaos. Daniel began to live differently after that day. He still felt anger, but he no longer let it steer his actions. He started to pause, breathe, reflect before responding. And strangely, life felt lighter. People around him changed too. They no longer tried to provoke him because they couldn't take his peace away anymore. That's the trap of reaction. It feels like power in the moment, but it's really surrender in disguise. When you stop reacting, you don't become passive, you become untouchable. So next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, remember Daniel's silence. It wasn't fear, it was wisdom. Because the one who can stay calm in chaos is the one who truly holds the power. 2. The ego's need to win. There was a woman named Sarah. She was intelligent, confident, and always stood up for what she believed in. At work, at home, even in small conversations, she needed to be right. If someone disagreed, she'd argue until they admitted her point. It wasn't about hurting anyone, she just couldn't stand the feeling of being misunderstood. But slowly, Sarah noticed something. The more she tried to prove herself, the more exhausted she felt. Her conversations turned into debates. Her relationships felt heavier. Even when she won, she didn't feel peace, just emptiness. One evening, after another long argument with a friend, Sarah sat alone, frustrated, drained. She opened a small book of Buddhist teachings that her mother once gave her. Her eyes stopped at a line from the Buddha. Asterisk, asterisk. Victory breeds hatred, for the defeated lives in pain. Happily live the peaceful, giving up both victory and defeat. Asterisk, asterisk. She read it again and again. For the first time, she saw her pattern clearly. She wasn't fighting to understand. She was fighting to times win. Asterisk. And that need, that constant hunger of the ego, was stealing her peace. Most arguments, she realized, don't come from truth-seeking. They come from the ego's desperate need to be seen as right. Ego doesn't care about harmony. It only wants recognition. It whispers, asterisk, if they agree with you, you matter. If they don't, you're less. Asterisk. But what if true power is the ability to stay silent when you know you're right? What if peace isn't found in victory, but in not needing to prove anything at all? Sarah began to test this. The next time her coworker challenged her opinion, she smiled and said, "You might be right." No argument, no defense, just quiet acceptance. And strangely, she felt free. Her mind was light, her heart calm. Over time, she learned something beautiful. When you stop trying to win, you start to understand. When you stop defending your image, you begin to see things as they truly are. Buddhism teaches that the ego's need to win is a trap. It promises satisfaction, but it only feeds restlessness. Because even if you win today, tomorrow the ego will crave another victory. It never stops wanting, and that's why it never finds peace. So, what's the real strength? It's not in winning every debate. It's in mastering yourself enough to not need to know your truth quietly without forcing it on anyone. That's the strength that can't be shaken. Sarah's life changed, not because she gave up her opinions, but because she stopped needing others to agree with them. And in that quiet surrender, she found something she had been chasing her whole life: peace. As the Buddha said, asterisk, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace, asterisk. Sometimes that word isn't spoken at all. It's the silence that comes when the ego finally lets go. 3. The gift of poison. There was a man named Michael. He was kind, humble, and always tried to treat people with respect. But no matter how good his intentions were, there was always someone ready to criticize him. A colleague at work who mocked his ideas, a family member who never missed a chance to remind him of his past mistakes. At first, Michael tried to defend himself. He argued, explained, justified, but it never seemed to change anything. The more he fought back, the worse he felt. One evening, his teacher, an old monk, noticed the heaviness in his eyes. "Why do you look so tired, Michael?" the monk asked. Michael sighed. "People keep throwing words at me, harsh ones. I try to stay calm, but it's like they're poisoning my mind." The monk smiled gently. "Tell me," he said, "if someone brings you a gift and you choose not to take it, who does it belong to?" Michael thought for a moment. "To the one who offered it." The monk nodded. "Exactly. Anger, insults, judgment, they are gifts of poison. If you don't accept them, they remain with the giver." Those words sank deep into Michael's heart. He realized that every insult, every attack, was like someone handing him a cup of poison. And every time he reacted, every time he drank from it, he was the one who suffered. From that day on, he began to practice a new kind of strength, the strength of not receiving. When people spoke with cruelty, he listened in silence. He didn't absorb their anger. He let it pass through him like wind through an open window. At first, it wasn't easy. His ego screamed, asterisk, "You can't let them talk to you like that!" Asterisk. But his heart whispered, asterisk, "You don't have to drink what they're serving." Asterisk. Weeks later, something beautiful happened. The same colleague who once mocked him stopped trying. The family member who used to criticize him softened. And for the first time in years, Michael felt peace, not because people changed, but because he did. Buddhism teaches that nothing others say can truly harm us unless we let it take root in our hearts. The Buddha once said, asterisk, "If someone abuses you and you do not accept it, the abuse returns to them." Asterisk. It's a simple truth: when you don't carry their poison, you stay pure. So the next time someone throws harsh words your way, pause. Take a breath. Remember that poison isn't yours unless you choose to drink it. Real strength isn't in shouting back. It's in smiling quietly, knowing their words can't touch your peace. Because in the end, the most powerful response is no reaction at all. 4. The art of non-response. There's a story about a man named David. He wasn't a monk. He wasn't a saint. He was just human like you and me. Every day at work, there was someone who tested his patience. A coworker who always found a reason to argue. A boss who criticized him in front of everyone. At first, David tried to explain, to defend, to prove that he was right. But every time he reacted, it only added more fire to the flame. He would go home exhausted, replaying the arguments in his head, wondering why people had to be so cruel. One evening, after a long and draining day, he went to visit his old friend, a monk he respected deeply. They sat quietly together under the soft light of dusk. David finally spoke, his voice heavy. "I don't understand," he said. "When people attack me, I try to explain myself, but it never helps. The more I react, the worse I feel." The monk smiled gently. He picked up a small bowl of water and said, "Watch closely." He dropped a handful of salt into it and stirred. "Now drink," he said. David took a sip, then frowned. "It's bitter." The monk nodded. He then walked to a nearby lake, dropped the same handful of salt into it, and said, "Now drink again." David cupped his hands, tasted the water, and smiled. "It's fresh." The monk looked at him kindly. "The salt is like someone's anger," he said. "It's always the same. But if your heart is small like this bowl, every word will taste bitter. If your heart is wide like the lake, nothing can poison it." That night, David couldn't stop thinking about those words. He realized something powerful: he had been reacting from a small bowl. Every insult, every judgment, every unfair word, he had let them fill his heart until there was no space for peace. So he began to practice the art of non-response. The next time his coworker tried to provoke him, David stayed silent. He didn't ignore, he simply chose not to engage. The coworker waited for him to react, but he didn't. And after a while, the other man ran out of energy. Because silence can do something, words never can. It disarms the storm. It confuses the ego. It turns noise into emptiness. Buddhism teaches, when you stay calm in the face of anger, you rob it of its power. True power isn't in the reaction, it's in restraint. Non-response isn't weakness, it's mastery. It's choosing peace when your mind wants war. It's standing still when everything in you wants to fight back. So the next time someone throws their anger at you, remember this: you don't have to catch it. You can let it pass. You can let silence speak for you. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. 5. Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. There was a woman named Emily. She was gentle by nature, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. But in her silence, people often misunderstood her. At work, her ideas were ignored because she rarely voiced them. At home, arguments built up because she didn't want to make things worse by speaking. She thought staying quiet was always the peaceful thing to do. But inside, her heart was noisy, filled with the words she never said. One day, after a long and tense meeting where she had stayed silent once again, Emily went to see her meditation teacher. The teacher was an elderly monk with a calm, radiant face. He poured 2 cups of tea and said, "Tell me, Emily, why do you stay silent even when your heart wants to speak?" Emily lowered her eyes. "Because I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered. The monk nodded, then said softly, "Silence can be golden, yes, but only when it comes from wisdom, not from fear." He looked at her and continued, "The Buddha once said, asterisk, before you speak, ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Asterisk, Creetown, on this palm, asterisk, asterisk, Creetown, asterisk, R, asterisk. If what you want to say passes these 3 gates, then speak with compassion. But if not, let silence protect your peace." Those words struck something deep inside her. She realized her silence had not been peace, it had been avoidance. She wasn't staying silent out of mindfulness, but out of fear of conflict, fear of rejection. And that fear had been slowly suffocating her voice. So she began to practice mindful speech. Not too much, not too little, just enough. When her coworker dismissed her ideas again, she calmly said, "I hear what you're saying, but may I share another view?" Her voice didn't tremble this time, it flowed with quiet confidence. And to her surprise, people listened. At home, when tension rose, she didn't withdraw into silence anymore. She chose her words with care, honest but gentle. And somehow, conversations that used to explode began to heal instead. She learned that wisdom isn't about always being silent, nor always speaking. It's about harmony, the balance between the two. Because sometimes silence can heal, but other times silence can wound. The Buddha's teaching echoed in her heart. Speak only when your words are more beautiful than silence. From that day forward, Emily didn't just avoid conflict, she created understanding. She discovered that true peace isn't in holding your tongue, but in knowing when to speak from truth and when to stay silent from love. So, the next time you find yourself unsure whether to speak or stay quiet, pause, take a breath, ask yourself the 3 questions, and let wisdom not fear, decide your words. 6. Strategies to deactivate conflict. There was once a man named Michael. He was kind, hardworking, and always tried to do the right thing. But one thing he couldn't control was how quickly things turned into arguments around him. At work, his manager snapped at him for mistakes that weren't his. At home, small misunderstandings with his wife became heated exchanges. He felt trapped in a cycle of conflict, trying to prove he was right, trying to be heard, trying to win. And yet, the more he fought back, the worse everything became. One evening, after another exhausting argument, Michael went for a walk. The air was cool, and the world felt quiet for once. He found himself standing in front of the small Buddhist temple he used to visit as a child. Something inside told him to go in. Inside, he met the old monk who had known him since he was a boy. The monk smiled and said, "You look like someone carrying too much noise in his heart." Michael sighed. "Everywhere I go, someone's angry. I try to explain, I try to fix things, but it always turns into a fight." The monk nodded slowly. Then he said, "When someone throws fire, do you throw fire back, or do you become water?" Michael frowned. "Water?" "Yes," the monk said, "because water doesn't fight fire. It transforms it." He continued, "When anger rises, it's easy to let your ego take control, to defend, to argue, to prove. But real strength lies in staying calm. When you say, 'I understand your point of view,' you aren't surrendering. You're reclaiming your peace." Michael thought about that. He remembered how his wife had shouted earlier that day. Instead of responding, he could have said, "Let's talk when we're calmer." Not to walk away, but to protect both of them from saying things they'd regret. The monk smiled again. "When you meet anger with gentleness, the storm loses its power. That's not weakness, that's mastery." Michael began to practice. The next time his manager raised his voice, he didn't react. He simply said, "I understand you're upset. Let's revisit this after I've reviewed the details." That simple shift changed everything. The argument ended before it could even begin. At home, he tried the same with his wife. Instead of defending, he listened. And when the moment was right, he spoke softly. "I hear you. Let's talk after dinner, when we both feel lighter." It wasn't easy. Sometimes, his ego screamed to fight back. But each time he chose calm over reaction, he felt freer, lighter. He realized that peace doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means knowing how to walk through it without losing yourself. As the Buddha taught, hatred never ends through hatred. Hatred ends only through love. This is the eternal law. And so Michael learned one of the deepest truths of all, that in every conflict he had two choices: to react and feed the fire, or to respond with awareness and become the water that cools the flame. 7. The freedom of detachment. There was a man named Daniel. He used to care deeply, maybe too deeply, about what others thought of him. A single harsh comment could ruin his whole day. A small rejection could make him question his worth. He was always chasing approval, trying to please everyone, hoping that if people liked him, he would finally feel enough. But one morning, something inside him broke. He woke up exhausted, not from work, but from constantly performing. He realized he was living his life for everyone else, not for himself. That day, he decided to visit a monastery he'd heard about years ago. There, he met a monk sweeping the courtyard in silence. Daniel asked him, "Why does it hurt so much when people don't like me, when they criticize me or walk away?" The monk smiled gently. He pointed to the broom in his hand and said, "When I sweep, I don't hold on to the dust. I simply let it go. But you, my friend, keep every speck of dust in your heart, every opinion, every judgment, until it becomes heavy. Daniel stood still. The monk continued, "Freedom doesn't come from controlling what others think of you. It comes from releasing your need for them to think anything at all." He paused, then added, "When you are no longer driven by reaction, you find peace. You don't need to prove who you are, because you already know. You stop seeking validation because truth doesn't need an audience." Those words stayed with Daniel long after he left. He began to notice how much energy he spent trying to control how people saw him adjusting, apologizing, pretending. So, he stopped. He stopped explaining himself to those determined to misunderstand. He stopped chasing after those who didn't value his presence. And slowly, he started to feel something he hadn't felt in years: freedom. The Buddha once said, "Attachment is the root of suffering." Daniel finally understood attachment wasn't just about possessions or people. It was about clinging to opinions, to approval, to the need to be right. As he learned to let go, life became lighter. He no longer reacted when someone criticized him. He no longer needed to be understood by everyone, because he understood himself. And that is the quiet power of detachment. It's not coldness. It's clarity. It's the freedom to walk through the noise of the world with peace in your heart, choosing only what is truly worthy of your energy. 8. Cultivating an unshakable mind. There was a woman named Claire. She was kind, thoughtful, and full of dreams, but her mind was like a storm. One day she was happy, the next she was anxious. A single word from someone could lift her up or break her down. She lived reacting to everything: the weather, people's moods, the news, even her own thoughts. One evening, after a long, overwhelming day, she visited a small temple on the edge of town. An old monk was sitting under a tree, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Claire sat beside him and sighed. "I just want peace, but everything keeps shaking me." The monk smiled without opening his eyes. He said, "The wind will always blow, my dear. The question is, are you the leaf or the mountain?" Those words hit her deeply. She realized that she had been living like a leaf tossed around by every gust of emotion and opinion. "So," she asked, "how do I become the mountain?" The monk opened his eyes and said softly, "By watching, not reacting. When anger rises, watch it. When fear appears, breathe with it. Don't push it away, and don't let it rule you. Just see it and let it pass." He continued, "Ask yourself this: will this still matter a year from now?" Most storms in the mind fade faster than we think. Don't give them the power to shape your peace. Claire began to practice. She started her mornings with a few quiet breaths. When stress came, she didn't rush to fix it, she observed it. When someone was rude, she paused instead of responding. Slowly, she noticed something shift. The world was still loud, unpredictable, and messy, but inside, she felt still. One day, a coworker tried to provoke her. Instead of reacting, she smiled and said, "Let's talk when things are calmer." That simple choice ended the conflict before it began. The Buddha once taught, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Claire finally understood peace wasn't something she had to find. It was something she had to build, moment by moment, breath by breath. And in that practice, she discovered her true strength. Because when your mind becomes still like a mountain, no storm, no word, no person, no fear can move you. You simply remain grounded, free, and unshakable. 9. The humor and lightness of wisdom. There was once a woman named Claire. She used to take everything in life so seriously, every mistake, every misunderstanding, every disappointment. If someone spoke harshly to her, she would replay it in her mind for days. If plans didn't go her way, she felt like the universe was against her. Her heart carried too much weight for too long. One afternoon, after a long and heavy week, she visited an old temple just outside the city. There, she found an elderly monk sitting quietly under a Bodhi tree, smiling as he watched the leaves fall. Claire sat beside him and sighed. "How can you smile so easily? Life is so difficult, and people can be so cruel." The monk looked at her kindly and said, "When the heart is still clouded, every shadow looks like a storm. But when the heart becomes clear, you begin to see that nothing is truly as big as it feels." He chuckled softly and added, "Sometimes wisdom isn't about knowing more. It's about taking things a little less seriously." Claire frowned. "But isn't that careless?" she asked. The monk shook his head. "No, it's freedom. When you laugh, not out of mockery, but out of understanding, suffering loses its grip on you." He picked up a dry leaf and held it out to her. This leaf once danced in the wind, soaked in rain, and now it returns to the earth. Do you think it resists? It simply follows the rhythm of life, lightly, without fear. In that moment, Claire felt something shift. She realized that she had been holding her pain too tightly, guarding it as if it defined her. But peace didn't mean escaping pain. It meant smiling at it, gently, knowingly. Weeks later, when life tested her again, when someone spoke harshly, when a plan fell apart, she paused, took a breath, and smiled. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally understood. Everything passes, and nothing can touch the stillness of a peaceful heart. As the Buddha once said, "A disciplined mind brings happiness." And sometimes that discipline begins with something as simple and as sacred as a smile. 10. The power of selective attention. There was a man named Daniel. From the outside, he seemed to have everything: a stable job, a nice home, a few close friends. But inside, his mind never rested. Every little inconvenience became a storm. Every unkind word echoed in his head for days. He didn't realize it, but he was feeding his pain every day, not with food, but with attention. He kept watering the weeds in his mind, while ignoring the flowers that were quietly trying to bloom. One evening, after another stressful day, Daniel visited his old teacher, a monk who had guided him years ago. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the reflection of the moon in a still pond. Daniel finally sighed and said, "Why is peace so hard to find? I try so hard, but my mind keeps running toward negativity." The monk smiled and replied softly, "Peace isn't found by running. It's found by noticing where you keep returning." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" The monk picked up a pebble and tossed it gently into the water. "Do you see that ripple? Your attention is like that. Wherever you drop it, that place grows larger in your life. If you keep dropping your attention into fear, fear expands. If you drop it into gratitude, peace expands." Then he added, quoting the Buddha, "What you dwell upon, you become. So choose carefully what you feed with your thoughts." Daniel sat quietly, watching the ripples fade back into stillness. For the first time, he realized how much power he had been giving away, not to people, not to events, but to his own focus. The next day, when someone criticized him, he noticed the sting, but instead of replaying it, he paused and took a breath. He turned his attention toward something kind: the warmth of sunlight on his hands, the laughter of a child nearby, the fact that he was still breathing. And little by little, the noise inside him began to soften. The more he chose where to place his mind, the lighter his heart became. The truth is, peace doesn't depend on what happens to us. It depends on what we choose to notice and what we choose to let go. As the monk once told him, "The mind is like a garden. If you don't plant flowers, the weeds will grow by themselves." So Daniel began to plant carefully, one thought at a time. And in doing so, he discovered something profound. Peace was never missing from his life. It had simply been waiting for him to look in its direction. 11. The true victory. There was a man named Daniel. From the outside, he seemed to have everything: a stable job, a nice home, a few close friends. But inside, his mind never rested. Every little inconvenience became a storm. Every unkind word echoed in his head for days. He didn't realize it, but he was feeding his pain every day, not with food, but with attention. He kept watering the weeds in his mind, while ignoring the flowers that were quietly trying to bloom. One evening, after another stressful day, Daniel visited his old teacher, a monk who had guided him years ago. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the reflection of the moon in a still pond. Daniel finally sighed and said, "Why is peace so hard to find? I try so hard, but my mind keeps running toward negativity." The monk smiled and replied softly, "Peace isn't found by running. It's found by noticing where you keep returning." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" The monk picked up a pebble and tossed it gently into the water. "Do you see that ripple? Your attention is like that. Wherever you drop it, that place grows larger in your life. If you keep dropping your attention into fear, fear expands. If you drop it into gratitude, peace expands." Then he added, quoting the Buddha, "What you dwell upon, you become. So choose carefully what you feed with your thoughts." Daniel sat quietly, watching the ripples fade back into stillness. For the first time, he realized how much power he had been giving away, not to people, not to events, but to his own focus. The next day, when someone criticized him, he noticed the sting, but instead of replaying it, he paused and took a breath. He turned his attention towards something kind: the warmth of sunlight on his hands, the laughter of a child nearby, the fact that he was still breathing. And little by little, the noise inside him began to soften. The more he chose where to place his mind, the lighter his heart became. The truth is, peace doesn't depend on what happens to us. It depends on what we choose to notice and what we choose to let go. As the monk once told him, "The mind is like a garden. If you don't plant flowers, the weeds will grow by themselves." So Daniel began to plant carefully, one thought at a time. And in doing so, he discovered something profound. Peace was never missing from his life. It had simply been waiting for him to look in its direction. Conclusion and profound lesson. If there's one truth that echoes through everything we've explored today, it's this: not everything deserves your reaction. Sometimes silence is the most powerful answer. We began this journey by looking at how our minds often pull us into chaos, how we get lost in emotions, in noise, in the need to be understood. But as we moved deeper, we saw a different kind of strength emerging. The strength of staying calm when everything around you demands a reaction. The wisdom of choosing peace over pride. And the quiet victory of mastering yourself instead of trying to control others. Because every time you stay silent instead of arguing, you take your power back. Every time you choose kindness over the need to prove yourself, you rise above the storm. And every time you stop chasing validation, you come home to a deeper freedom inside. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." That's the lesson hidden in every pause, every deep breath, every moment you decide to let go instead of fight back. So as you step away from this video, remember, your peace doesn't depend on how the world treats you. It depends on what you choose to give your attention to. When you guard your focus, you guard your heart. And when you master your reactions, you master your life. If this message touched you, if it reminded you of someone who could use a little calm today, send this video to them. Let it be a gentle reminder that sometimes the greatest wisdom isn't in speaking, but in knowing when to stay silent. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to like it and share your thoughts below. Which moment or insight spoke to your heart the most? Thank you for staying until the very end. May your days be filled with stillness, clarity, and gentle strength. And until we meet again, keep your mind light, your heart steady, and your smile sincere.